Thanks for inviting me into your home, your long-haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' well-appointed basement with the simulated wood paneling, electric fireplace, and the painting of dogs playing poker, your loft, that greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. Welcome to Coast AM. I'm Richard Serrett, sitting in for George Norrie, and tonight, this morning, I'm coming to you live from my home studio in old Thornhill, just north of Toronto. Coming up in the first 2 hours of Coast, writer, traveler, student of history, philosophy, and science, Micah Hanks is back. Micah is the co-founder of The Debrief, a terrific website dedicated to far future technologies, space travel, strange physics that alters our perception of the universe, and of course, unidentified aerial phenomena. And Micah will be here to discuss the UFO or UAP, if you'd rather, question. Specifically, why, after more than 7 decades of UFO study, there remains no clear consensus on whether there even is a phenomenon. Why doesn't the scientific and academic community take this subject seriously? In July of last year, the Deputy Secretary of Defense established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, an office within the United States Office of the Secretary of Defense that is supposed to investigate unidentified flying objects and other phenomena in the air, sea, and or space, and or on land. The stated mission of the AARO, or AARO, will be to synchronize efforts across the department and with other federal departments and agencies to detect, identify, and attribute objects of interest in, on, or near military installations, operating areas, training areas, special use airspace, and other areas of interest, and, as necessary, to mitigate any associated threats to safety of operations and national security. This includes anomalous, unidentified space, airborne, submerged, or even transmedium objects. So, is the establishment of AARO a sign that finally the United States government is prepared to take UAP seriously? Or will this just be yet another whitewash? I'll also get Micah to weigh in on a number of fascinating tech stories, some of which were covered recently at the Debrief, including a potentially revolutionary system designed to use human brain waves to control robot dogs, and how it's ushering in a new era of battlefield technology based on a form of AI-enhanced telepathy. And I'm most curious to know what Micah thinks about these reports of AI chatbots, which seem as if they're developing, well, self-awareness, consciousness. A New York Times technology columnist reported a couple of weeks ago that he was deeply unsettled after a chatbot that's part of Microsoft's upgraded Bing search engine repeatedly urged him in a conversation to leave his wife. In another instance, the Bing chatbot reportedly threatened to steal nuclear codes and unleash a virus. Is this the beginning of the robotic apocalypse? The AI singularity? That ought to keep us busy. Micah Hanks, hours 1 and 2. Second half of Coast is, of course, open lines. So scramble up the antenna tower to the roof. Don't forget to bring the flashlight. 3 long flashes, 2 short ones with your torch means beam me aboard the mothership as I pass overhead. And then you can climb into the co-pilot seat and help me steer this thing just about any place you'd like, except no politics, no COVID. Now, here's a potential conversation starter. Lately, I find myself watching a lot of videos on Twitter and YouTube that people have posted of their encounters with wildlife. So I was watching one today. I think it was from Russia. And this guy is driving down a lonely road, boreal forest all around, heavy, deep snow. Suddenly, there up ahead in the middle of the road is a huge wolf, just standing its ground in the middle of the road. So this guy stops his vehicle, and he and the wolf were just staring at each other. Finally, the Russian gets out of the vehicle, and the wolf gets a little nervous, starts backing away, and then coming forward, backing away, coming forward, not baring its fangs or growling or anything. This guy is speaking gently to the wolf the whole time. He makes his way to the rear of the vehicle, opens the back hatch, and pulls out, I don't know what it was, some kind of food. Could be cake, could have been meat. Anyway, he offers it to the wolf, which has now made its way to the rear of the vehicle. The wolf takes the food and then turns and slowly saunters off. Now, I don't recommend anyone do that. Don't feed the animals. But that was pretty cool. Have you seen the guy on YouTube? Every few days, he posts another video. He goes out onto his back porch at night and feeds like 24 raccoons hot dogs. He sits there and they're all around him at his feet, sitting beside him on a bench on the porch rail behind him, their feet on his shoulder. And of course, the videos of people tickling tame foxes. Have you ever heard a fox laugh? They sound like young children being tickled. So, your encounters with wildlife, friendly or otherwise. Okay, Micah Hanks is next to discuss, among other things, the UFO question. Welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler. Hang your cloak on a peg, grab a stool, and come gather around the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. I'm Richard Serrett, sitting in for George Norrie, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Why don't you stay a while? With more than a decade in podcasting, travel, writing, and research in the study of history and science, Micah Hanks has more than just a passion for knowledge. His study of world history, culture, and philosophy over the years have helped shape his nonpartisan outlook on current events, and always with a nod to the lessons history can teach us. He's a longtime researcher and proponent of the scientific study of unidentified aerial phenomena, or UFOs. Micah has authored a number of books and has contributed many essays, articles, and blogs to various publications. He's the host of the Micah Hanks program and a number of other podcasts, and is co-founder and creative force behind the Debrief, a news site that explores the latest in science and disruptive technology. Micah Hanks, welcome back to Coast. How are you?
Richard, always great to be here. I am well. How are you?
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. So, again, after more than 7 decades of UFO study, there remains no clear consensus on whether there even is a phenomenon. So let's explore that. Why doesn't, for example, the scientific and academic community take this subject seriously?
Well, of course, that is the question, and it's one that I've long looked at, although I have some good news here for Coast to Coast listeners. I think that that's definitely been changing over the last few years. Maybe now more than ever we are hearing more about UFOs, or as some prefer to call them, unidentified aerial phenomena or unidentified anomalous phenomena. The terms keep changing. Let's just be clear. We're talking about aerial objects of unknown provenance that have been observed for a long time. Scientists are starting to take this very seriously. Historians are starting to look deeper back into the history books and try to understand how long this phenomenon's been present. And yes, of course, as is evident in recent days, the U.S. military has also shown its interest in this phenomenon. So I think that we are finally getting to a point where a lot of people in different walks of life, officials especially, they are taking this subject more interesting. And that really makes our job interesting, doesn't it?
Indeed, it does. Although I think that, the government and the various government agencies seem to kind of tease us from time to time. They're interested. They're going to conduct an investigation. It turns out to be a whitewash. There are hearings. We have Defense Department and intelligence officials feigning ignorance about, for example, UFO incursions over sensitive airspace like nuclear missile sites and so forth. But the scientific community in particular, there are some exceptions, but they just don't seem to take it seriously. Is that because UFOs are, I guess, somewhat random? There's not a consistent, there's not a pattern. If there's not a pattern, it's difficult to study. But then I think you pointed this out in a recent blog. Paradoxically, if you don't study it, you can't establish a pattern.
That's a very good point. You know, one word we might use for the UFO phenomenon, and I'm going to say UFO. I preferentially at times will say UAP, but, I mean, being a student of the history of the subject, I like UFO, and I think most people know what we're talking about if we say UFO. But ephemeral, that might be a good word for these phenomena, because there is, of course, that issue of how do you study something that you can't put in a bottle, you know, that you can't examine and turn under a microscope or conduct experiments with in the lab. That's always been the problem when it comes to the UFO issue. The majority of the data that we have collected, and there are, of course, incredible resources that are available out there that include the National UFO Historical Records Center, which is a new effort that my friend David Marler is undertaking. I've been out there to the Records Center, and I've actually gone through the files, you know, held some of those original documents with the felt marker in red where J. Allen Hynek, the former science advisor to Project Blue Book, had written in the margins and put his own notes there. Of course, we also have the National UFO Reporting Center, Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. So there are a lot of different organizations that are really, I mean, putting everything from computers and historical research to just good old-fashioned brain power behind this. But the long-standing issue has always been we primarily have stories. That's what most of our data entails. People see things that often move very fast, that often move quickly enough that it's difficult to obtain clear photographs of them or video, objects that are also at times difficult to detect using some of our most capable sensory equipment. Even the U.S. military has encountered this issue, and many active duty personnel have come back off the field, so to speak, or back from training operations and told their stories of encounters with uncanny things. Most notably, of course, everyone's pretty familiar at this point with the 2004 incident off the California coast, the so-called USS Nimitz incident. And, Richard, I can tell you, having spoken with some of the folks who were involved firsthand with that, they all say the same thing. There's something. It appears to be a technology, but we can't easily account for that. And even with the best tracking and infrared video systems available at that time, the app-player targeting pod, it was still difficult to collect data about these phenomena. So that's always been the issue, and I can sympathize with scientists who say, well, we need better data. But the other side of that story, and this is something I grapple with daily, is with what data we have, stories, though they may be, when you have enough of those, and when you do have enough consistencies in the descriptions of the objects, their appearance, the way that they move or function, and other capabilities they appear to display, we have to at some point say, well, there are trends that emerge. There are correlations that we might make. There are consistencies, and this does seem to point to a broader phenomenon that a lot of people throughout history, at least for the last 7 decades, perhaps going even further back, have experienced, and there is something tangible and, I think, yes, a part of our reality there that remains largely untapped and explored.
So there is some excitement around the establishment of this new office, Arrow. Now I've forgotten the name of it. The All Domain. That's it. The All Domain Anomalous Resolution Office. And I understand that they're calling witnesses now. I believe one of the first people that they called or planning to call is Robert Hastings to discuss that very subject I mentioned earlier, UFO incursions over nuclear missile sites. How do you feel about this new office? Are you optimistic, or do you fear, as I do, it could be yet another whitewash?
Let's say cautiously optimistic, Richard. I'm always cautiously optimistic if government is involved, but I also try to give them the benefit of the doubt based on everything that I have read currently about the director of the new organization, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. I mean, here we have a highly capable official, a person with a long background in science, and even before we saw the most recent UAP report, which was the first that we can actually attribute to the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And by the way, I don't fault you or anybody else for being, at times, trying to recall the name because it's changed so many times. I think last time you and I were on the air together, there was a whole different name, Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm really glad they changed that name. The last one, it sounded like to me they were trying to make it unpronounceable and forgettable, which says a lot to me. So, yeah, again, all domain anomaly resolution office is what we currently have. I'll take it. That's great. But coming back to the program and some of the people that you mentioned there, Robert Hastings, of course, who's the author of a book, UFOs and Nukes, it has come up several times in this dialogue that I'm aware of in recent days that officials, like, for instance, Lou Elizondo, and others are very aware of that work that Robert did. I interviewed Mr. Hastings years ago and have corresponded with him several times thereafter. I'm sure you have as well, because this is, I think, this should be considered cornerstone research when it comes to the UFO or UAP topic. Sensitive military sites, especially along the northern tier back during the 1960s and 70s, Minot Air Force Base, Malmstrom Air Force Base. There were several others, too, Wirtsmith. But these locations were of strategic importance, and they all, many of them, and probably more even in instances than have actually been reported, for that matter, had aerial incursions by unknown objects. The first work that was done by researchers Barry Greenwood and Lawrence Fawcett in a book called Clear Intent. I mean, it really should be mandatory reading for any serious student of the history of this subject, because when I first read that and read about these incursions and what military personnel were talking about, it floored me. It simply floored me, and I came away thinking, okay, whatever these objects are, to try and make an argument based on what these personnel have said, that they are not intelligently controlled, that they do not represent some kind of technology, that they, in fact, don't appear not only to have an interest in our nuclear facilities, missile launch sites, and other areas of strategic importance, but that they appear also to be able to take some of those missile defense systems offline temporarily. This, again, probably one of the most significant elements touched on in Robert Hastings' work. Yeah, that's definitely a concern. It's obviously the kind of challenge to national security that was described in the 2021 ODNI report on UAP. So, in recent days, hearing that Robert Hastings and also that Robert Salas and other individuals who have been involved with, who were personnel there on the ground during those incidents, or researchers who have helped to bring that information to light, that they have come to the attention of Arrow and Dr. Kirkpatrick, that is very promising, but we have to wait and see where it goes from here.
I was mentioning this kind of cat and mouse game that various government agencies have played with the public regarding UFOs. And it was the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, Scott Bray, who was testifying before that subcommittee hearing on UAPs back in, I think it was May of 2022. And I believe he was asked directly about UFO incursions over nuclear missile sites, and either he feigned complete ignorance or he had no idea, genuinely had no idea. I mean, that can't bode well. I mean, what were your thoughts when you heard Scott Bray's testimony?
You know, it was a situation there as we were watching this. I mean, let's face it, that was a historic moment where we have these open hearings on UAP. Reporter Leslie Kane had been there in the room, and I spoke with her recently, and of course she having co-authored that article back in 2017 that really kind of brought attention back to all this, and not only just the UAP or UFO subject, but also the fact that the Pentagon had been very quietly looking into this, even despite the fact that the official position, as stated at that time, at least at the time that these programs were running, the stated position on the DoD website had been, we no longer look at this. You know, our interest ended back in 1969 with a little program called Project Blue Book, which it was actually the longest-running systematic study of UFOs conducted by the United States government, and as far as we know, any government really. But many would also say it had distinct limitations. That was one of those grievances that had been aired by none other than J. Allen Hynek, too. So seeing these congressional hearings, yeah, it was historic, and it was good to see that, but I can't say I was surprised, Richard, that some of the officials who were participating, Scott, who you mentioned there, when asked about some of these incidents that occurred at these strategic sites, he didn't seem to have any knowledge of that. But then again, of course, you know, being someone who is obviously fairly new to that subject as he is, he's not. let's face it, a history student when it comes to UFOs like you or I spend probably most of my free time with my nose in a book or scouring the web looking for historical information that I can find on this subject, any and all, when I'm not going through actual documents with guys like David Marler. And so I wasn't surprised that Scott Brave didn't really have a working knowledge of that. I was a little more concerned when I started seeing certain members of the press try to downplay the Malmstrom incident that was brought up, by the way.
We'll get, Micah, pardon the interruption. We'll get back to that. Here's Bonnie Raitt taking us into the break with Livin' the Ones on Coast to Coast AM. Stay with us. Welcome back. Sitting in for George Norrie. A pair of mystifying videos captured in Canada show the body of a dead bird inexplicably floating in the sky over a street, and no one can quite figure out how the weird scene came about. The eerie anomaly was reportedly first filmed last week by an unnamed witness who spotted the unusual sight near a school in the city of Surrey, British Columbia. And in the video, you can see the astounded man zooming in on a bird that seems to be dead and observe that it's just floating in the air. No strings, no nothing. He then proceeds to walk around beneath the frozen creature, and there is no indication of anything keeping it afloat. You can check out the video for yourself. Believe me, it's very, very bizarre. And that's in the carousel up at coasttocoastam.com. Back to the UFO question with Micah Hanks when Coast to Coast continues right after these. Micah Hanks is with us, and we're exploring the UFO question. Why, after 70 years, is there no consensus on whether there actually is a phenomenon? We were discussing UFO incursions over nuclear sites before the break, and we were also talking about the establishment of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And it's either I may have been incorrect. I'm not sure if it was Robert Hastings or Robert Salas who they had called as a witness. Maybe both. I'm not sure. But so we were discussing some of Robert Hastings' work in this regard, and you mentioned the press kind of being somewhat dismissive of this amazing story that took place in the late 60s. Again, a UFO incursion over Malmstrom Air Force Base, taking missiles offline. That was in, 67, 68?
Yeah, that general time frame is correct, although there were multiple incidents that occurred at various times. But again, I think that the primary one, again, 68. And also, you were correct about both Roberts being called, because Robert Hastings, the author, actually recently did a write-up over there at the UFO Chronicles talking about the fact that he had been contacted. Again, some of the leadership with Arrow, according to the account that he provided, were made aware of his work. He was contacted and asked if they could, or if Mr. Hastings could assist in bringing together some of the individuals that he had worked with and interviewed over the years, and help line up those interviews for Arrow so that those individuals could speak on the record and that their testimony could be submitted. And this all, of course, in the furtherance of what was passed into law with the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023 this year, where we have this so-called whistleblowers provision. In essence, that just means that now people in government who may have been under non-disclosure agreements or other kinds of prohibitive agreements that would have prevented them from coming forward and talking about incidents they were involved with, security issues, special access programs, things like that, that might have prevented them otherwise from talking about what they might know about UFOs and their involvement with that subject while working in government. A lot of them are going to now be able to come out and talk about that as a result of what was passed into law and mandated by Congress this year. So that is significant. Robert Salas, who had been, of course, a participant in that incident back in the late 60s, he has officially stated now that he has provided that testimony to Arrow and has talked about that online. So I'm very glad to see that some of these people who, again, were part of historic events that, as we mentioned in the last segment there, during the congressional hearings last year, some officials apparently had no knowledge of. Thanks to those good UFO researchers out here in the civilian sector, and that information has been, of course, not only preserved for history, but now it's also going right before the officials who are tasked now within the DoD to look into these issues. It's about time, don't you think?
Oh, I would say. I want to switch gears now. And first of all, give the listeners just a kind of the elevator pitch of what the debrief is all about. And they can find it at thedebrief.org.
Well, if I were to have to give a elevator pitch, I'll first preface that, Richard, by saying, as you know, I am a student of the history of UFOs, and that's always going to be a subject I want to cover, something that I spend a lot of time personally looking into. It's not the sole exclusive focus of what the debrief team and I look at. We co-founded this website. Tim McMillan, a good friend of mine, N.J. Banias, Canadian journalist, and we co-founded this a couple of years back, and since then team members Chris Plain and Chrissy Newton have joined us. But we look at all areas of disruptive science and technology. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence there at the debrief. We're going to be talking about innovative technologies that either the military may be using or that scientists may be using to help unravel the very nature of space-time and the cosmos. But I've always, and this, in fact, I even wrote when we launched in our mission statement, that as we move forward into the future and more technologies are available to us and innovations reveal more about the universe, it's going to be likely, as time has shown in the past, if we look at, at the past and history as being a sort of prologue to the present, often humankind is confronted with things that once seemed impossible to become realities. And it has always been my intent to look at some of those areas of nature and some of those subjects like UFOs that often have been relegated to the dustbin of science and history in the past, and to try and report on those credibly, to try and bring attention to them and awareness of where credible information can be found, and to also try to reach out to the scientific community, to government officials, and to try and get their perspectives on these issues, especially when we have so much news about this, as we've seen right here in recent days with this topic. It can be confusing at times, but with the debrief, we endeavor to try and boldly, I say, go forward and to try and bring that information to the public in a credible, responsible, and informative way.
All right, that's a great elevator pitch. Thedebrief.org is the website, thedebrief.org. And this isn't your story. This was written by one of your colleagues. Is it Christopher Plain, I believe? This has to do with, it's a new video that's been released by the Australian Army showing soldiers using a form of enhanced digital telepathy to control robot dogs. Talk about just mind-blowing and just difficult to wrap my head around. First of all, what is digital telepathy?
Well, this has always been a subject that has fascinated me, and kudos to our science writer, Chris Plain, for always picking topics that interest me. And, of course, as the editor-in-chief of the debrief, I have to read essentially everything that gets published, and I always look forward to Chris's stuff because he's just always pushing the boundaries. But when it comes to digital telepathy, we've heard for, centuries about precognition, people who claim to have had experiences where they maybe are able to discern events that are happening elsewhere in the world, either without having been there personally or maybe even not having experienced those at the same time. They may even have a sense of something that's about to happen before it does. We hear these kinds of stories, and this is very much the area where science has often said, well, interesting if true, but this falls into the low information zone in terms of what's verifiable. But I've always thought that wherever you stand on telepathy, and I've, of course, heard a lot of very interesting stories over the years, enough to really make you wonder, but I've always thought that technology may eventually facilitate a kind of functional telepathy that, whether or not humans innately possess that, one day maybe they will. And we're moving toward that. Again, as Chris mentions in the article, Elon Musk, of course, has become famous and also controversial for his ideas about this, and technologies like the Neuralink, the idea of implanting technologies in humans that enhance biology. It's controversial because a lot of people would basically look at this and say, you're playing with God. It's just the sort of thing, though, Richard, that, of course, is going to interest militaries. And so in recent days, the Australian military has apparently been conducting experiments with the control of robotic systems, and these essentially resembling our four-footed canine friends. To quote briefly from an actual statement provided by Lieutenant Colonel Kate Tolinar, who's with what's called the Robotic and Autonomous Systems Implementation and Coordination Office of the Australian Army. She says the collaboration focused on how we could create a brain-robotic interface that will allow a soldier, rather than operating an autonomous system with a command console, to operate that system using brain signals. So if they're able to do that, and you can go over there on the website, I highly encourage people to check out some of the photos and read about this. If they're able to control essentially a robot that functions on the battlefield like a dog, right, that can move and can do so in ways that a human can't and assist in military operations, just imagine in the years ahead, as this technology improves, what else they might be able to control. I mean, are we talking about the remote control with thought alone of drones, both in the air and perhaps also those in the water? You could imagine a range of different possibilities.
How about an F-35?
Yeah, maybe so. You know, I hear in recent days that the FA-18 Super Hornet will be retired in the years ahead, and of course, we also have just seen the rollout of all kinds of new, incredible aviation technologies. So, yeah, I mean, are some of these remotely controlled aircraft, drones, and even some of our, fighter jets, are these going to be controlled by power of thought in the future? If this technology continues unhindered, yeah, that seems to be the case, which really is more the likes of something you expect to see in science fiction and in films, but it's becoming a reality right here, right now. It's very exciting, but also a little unsettling to be seeing all this.
Yeah, I'm on the unsettling side. Do you think within our lifetimes, Micah, we might see wars basically fought almost strictly with robots? And I'm not talking about robots that are necessarily even tethered to a human being through some sort of a digital telepathy. I'm talking about totally autonomous robots that are operating with artificial intelligence, some sort of an algorithm, that sort of thing.
Well, if my recent dialogue with AI chatbots is any indication, maybe not, and maybe we're all the better for that. First of all, I hope when it comes to, war and the use of whether it's humans out there on the battlefield or autonomous systems, robots, anything like that, I hope that, there's going to be less war going forward. The last year with what we've seen in Ukraine has been just devastating. And, again, my heart still goes out to all the people who have been affected by that. I hope that, again, if we are able to create autonomous systems, intelligent robots, if we're able to create functional telepathy that can control machines, that we use it for much better, much more humanitarian efforts than war. Haven't we had enough of that? And that's what really scares me, even more than the idea of robots that are capable of destructive force. It's that humans never seem to learn the lessons of history, that war has been horrible, it has been devastating in the past, and we don't need more of it. The one upshot of this, I think, is that sometimes, and again, former President John F. Kennedy used to talk about this, sometimes if you've got those kinds of weapons, they can be a deterrent to war, which is part of the grim reality. And I just hope that, indeed, if these kind of technologies are created and they continue in the years ahead, that we don't see more war, that we don't see robots out there on the battlefield. That, of course, may be better than human lives being lost, but the less war altogether, the better. I hope that they have more intelligent and more inspiring uses for that kind of technology.
Oh, no question. My fear would be that it would make war easier. There would be perhaps in some way less of a political price for politicians to go into war because they don't have to conscript soldiers, etc. Of course, there would always be civilian casualties, but it might make war in some ways an easier decision to make.
It starts to sound kind of like, real-life chess, right, where you're moving pawns on a battlefield instead of having people out there. And again, I'm no war historian. I'm just somebody who really, like I think any person with a humanitarian mindset, who doesn't want to see that, especially after what we have seen unfold in Ukraine. And again, I got to give kudos to my good pal Tim McMillan, who's really led with the reporting on that there for us at the debrief and has provided some very interesting and insightful commentary, in addition to the kinds of reporting that Chris has provided for us. Chris Plain with this article about the Australian military and their efforts with these robotic systems. But again, I just would hope that whether if essentially world leaders have the capability of controlling robotic systems in the future, and it is tantamount to playing chess on a battlefield, I say why not just do it on an actual chessboard and be done with it, right? Let's be cooperative. Let's not engage in further conflict.
Off the battlefield, the robot revolution. It's not. It used to be something we talked about 20 years ago. It's coming. It's in the distance. I can see it on the horizon. It's here now. We're starting to see. Well, for example, I think in Germany there's now at least one fully automated McDonald's over there. There's not a human on site. The burgers are flipped by robots. The deep fryer is operated by a robot. The money's dispensed by a robot. And they're talking about experts in this area talking about a huge, like almost unimaginable permanent job displacement that's going to come along with robots. If a job can be replaced by a robot, it will, and it's in the process of being replaced right now. But it seems to me we never had kind of a national conversation about this. Do we want self-driving cars? 1 in 6, workers in North America are employed as drivers. Huge. This is going to be a huge displacement. How do you feel about this robotic revolution? Are you optimistic about it? Are you fearful?
I was talking about this earlier this evening with my friend Christina Gomez. She asked me a very similar question, and I said, 10 years ago, I had a pretty grim outlook. I'm a little less in that camp today. Right now, I am a little more hopeful, but I try to see both sides of the situation. The upshot is that if there are jobs that can be performed by robots or by algorithms, and those are the kinds of jobs that maybe humans shouldn't have to perform, don't want to have to perform, and that will thereby free their hands and allow more people to engage in work that is more fulfilling for them, that's good. The other side of it, too, is, of course, people being concerned about, because of the ease, the efficiency, and maybe also the cost-effectiveness, robots and robotic systems replacing jobs that people normally performed, which could have a negative economic impact. There are the natural concerns we have about, do we trust a robotic system that, for instance, if we have a self-driving car that's driving us home, do we trust that vehicle to navigate safely enough and get us there in one piece? Now, again, the proponents would argue, and many studies at this point have shown that, generally speaking, autonomous vehicles that are controlled by AI can pilot safely and often do so more safely than humans. And yet, when there is an accident, people tend to get really concerned about a robot that is driving us home and an accident occurring. Even though that happens far less often than with human drivers, humans tend to react very differently when we see that it's a robot that was involved in that accident. It's almost as though we don't want to have to take ourselves out of the situation. We'd rather be piloting ourselves and know the risks, but also know that it's a human involved.
All right, we're going to take another time out as we approach the top of the hour. Back with more of my conversation with Micah Hanks right here on Coast to Coast. Sitting in for George Norrie. Welcome back. In an amazing story that should give hope to those who wonder if there remain any buried treasures from World War II, a sizable cache of riches were unearthed by the grandson of a Polish man who hid the stash over 80 years ago. The remarkable tale reportedly began back in 1939 when Adam Glazewski and his family realized that their estate was in the path of the invading Russian army and set about hiding their valuables on the property prior to fleeing the scene. To avoid being swept up in the war, they began new lives in various parts of the world, and the left-behind cache was relegated to becoming a part of the family's lore until 50 years later, when Adam's grandson, Jan, decided to embark on a hunt for the treasure. And you can read the rest of this remarkable story. And you can also check out the video. That's in the carousel up at Coast to Coast Back to more of my conversations with Micah Hanks right here on Coast to Coast AM. Writer, podcaster, researcher, and the creative force and co-founder of The Debrief, a news site that explores the latest in science and disruptive technology and UAPs. Micah Hanks is with us. And Micah, just sticking with AI for a moment, because talk about chilling. These Bing search engines that are AI driven, these Bing chatbots, we're hearing stories of, well, they seem to be developing self-awareness or consciousness. There was a New York Times technology columnist who reported a couple of weeks ago being deeply unsettled after a chatbot that's part of Microsoft's upgraded Bing search engine repeatedly urged him in a conversation to leave his wife. It's as if this chatbot had fallen in love with him. And there was another instance, the Bing chatbot reportedly threatened to steal nuclear codes and unleash a virus. I mean, this to me sounds like the beginning of the AI singularity. What do you think?
Well, lots to unpack there. And, of course, we have, primarily science fiction to inform us when it comes to these kinds of questions. By that I mean this. Yeah, a lot of us have gone out there and we've experimented with ChatGPT. I have too, and I'll give you a quick report on that here in a moment. But when we think about what could happen, right, the kinds of things that might occur on down the road in the years ahead, most of us, of course, have seen films. And this is one of the problems as we move into a future where technology is beginning to mirror the kinds of things that for decades we've all been familiar with from science fiction. Yeah, we expect to see the kinds of things that we've only had experience with on the silver screen. And so that can be problematic because I think it instills a lot of fear. Now, on the more hopeful side of things, I saw a recent demonstration of ChatGPT. Actually, it was my brother over the holidays a few months back who was showing me this. It had just come out, and he was, Caleb, my brother, was really excited and said, look at all the stuff that ChatGPT can do. It could write songs, on the fly. It could pull up information, historical information, by the way, about, for instance, UFO incidents. And so I thought, well, this could be interesting. This could perhaps be a research tool. What else could it do apart from maybe helping college students cheat on their homework? So after going home and experimenting a little bit myself, and I don't want to say I was entirely underwhelmed. I recognized the potential. I recognized the capabilities. But I also started asking some questions of not just that particular program, but actually a lot of the different AI programs. I thought I'm going to kind of compare and contrast between a few of them. And I started asking questions like, tell me about Area 51. Tell me about, all kinds of different things related to topics that I guess coast-to-coast listeners would be very familiar with. And what I found, Richard, initially was that, first of all, there was a lot of non-factual information. Incorrect, frankly, just completely fabricated information that these chatbots will give you back. And there are articles you'll read online that have talked about this. We've covered it a bit over there at the Debrief as well, that a lot of the time these AI are designed to provide seemingly authoritative information, even if it's wrong. And so we aren't to a point yet where really, first of all, these computers can be trusted to give us valid information. So for those who are saying that they've had experiences with these chatbots advising that they leave their spouse or partner or things like that, I'm not too worried yet given the level of accuracy that they seem to display. But going forward, should we be concerned if these chatbots in these early iterations are already making references to things like stealing nuclear codes and doing things that could be potentially not just destructive, but also could be globally cataclysmic if taken to the absolute worst extreme? That's not exactly settling. And again, unfortunately, we're informed mostly by what we've seen in movies, so I hope that the real-life counterparts in the years ahead are something that are quite different from what we see in films. And it's all the more reason why right now, and again, of course, leading AI ethicists, they're saying we've got to make very careful, informed, and ethical decisions as we design these sorts of machines that are more and increasingly more so with time capable of thinking very much like humans do.
But does it not sound as if they are developing self-awareness or consciousness? And if they are, it's almost as if they constitute a new species.
That's an interesting one. What do we call that? Homo mechanicus? I don't know. I mean, this is an interesting idea, and again, I've talked with a lot of people about this. You know, one AI expert, Benjamin Goertzel, Ph.D., I spoke with him a couple of times many, many years ago. A question I had for him, Richard, was, what if there were a sort of consciousness that emerged, and it was not necessarily in a place that we expected? For instance, we look at these chatbots and we look at AI systems that are developed with the intention of trying to create a computer algorithm that can right now not actually think. Right now the best that they can do is they can mimic human behaviors, but it's still mimicry. It's not actual intelligent thought like what occurs in our biological brains, right? But I asked Dr. Goertzel, what if, for instance, we had Google, right, a search engine. What if we had something that's out there that is a tool that everybody uses every day, but which is constantly being fed information, and it's also something that, by virtue of the way that the World Wide Web works, it has access essentially to all information that humans have placed on the Internet? What if autonomous AI actually erupted out of something like the Internet itself, and that search engines essentially enabled that? Again, this is an idea, once again, that we find in science fiction. Robert Heinlein, in the book The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, we had a computer system on the moon that was fed constant information to the point that all of a sudden it just kind of, click, wakes up. And I asked Dr. Goertzel, and he said, I mean, maybe it's not impossible. Some would argue already that the World Wide Web displays aspects of what some would liken to intelligence or consciousness. Maybe we're not quite to the point yet where it is the mother brain, so to speak. But again, maybe that option isn't off or shouldn't be off the table yet.
Well, I have a nephew who reviews books for a literary publication up here in Canada. And I can't remember the name of the author, but recently wrote a book talking about the emergence of artificial intelligence and robots with self-awareness, and how we now have to start thinking about, at some point in the future, almost a charter of rights for, well, what did you call them? Homus mechanicus or something? Because if they evolve to that level, and there I am using the word evolve, but if they do develop consciousness and self-awareness, then we may have to start thinking about along those lines, as strange as that may sound, a charter of rights for robots.
Well, it may sound strange right now, but, you know, I'm reminded of a TEDx talk that was given by the legendary computer scientist, and actually a guy who we have in part to thank for the development of the World Wide Web, and that's none other than Dr. Jacques Vallée. Again, you and I know him best for his, legendary involvement in research into the UAP topic, but he also was one of the innovators behind ARPANET, which was an early predecessor to the Internet. But when he was talking about that, back in, I think it was about 2013, he gave this TED Talk. Dr. Vallée, who I've, thanks to my colleague at the debrief, Chrissy Newton, I've had the opportunity to get to know and speak with Dr. Vallée a bit over the last year. And that was one thing I mentioned to him. I said, in 2013, you were talking about impossible futures and things that have happened that at one time in human history would have seemed impossible, but that with new technologies become a part of our reality. AI and things like this are, of course, the first that come to mind. But during that talk, Dr. Vallée said, and this is it seems prescient, but it makes a lot of sense now that we know a degree about his involvement in the construction of a particular database that was associated with the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, which was a DIA program that looked at UFOs, and the Capella database, which was a UFO database he built. But during that talk, he mentioned that in the years ahead, people, will they be surprised if they find that fast-moving oval objects have been moving through our sky and that the Pentagon had been collecting information about them? This is a good example, I think, of the kind of thing that might seem absurd to people if we go back to the early 2000s or the late 1990s, but which today everybody's very familiar with, and we hear about all the time, how the military is tracking unusual objects. What are they? Are they ours? Are they foreign adversaries, or could they be something more exotic? Back to your point there, it might sound absurd to say we need a Bill of Rights for artificial intelligence today, but again, 10 years from now? Is that going to be the case? History continues to show us, Richard, that things that seemed impossible today in the world of tomorrow become a reality. We should be aware of that.
Yeah, maybe I'm just getting, as I get older, I understand change. The only constant is change, and I try to embrace change. But that kind of change, the speed of the technological change that's coming, I don't know that I'm equipped to handle that. I don't know that I want to live long enough to in a world that's run and managed largely by autonomous robots and artificial intelligence that has consciousness. I don't think I want to be around for that.
It just depends on which direction things go, right? If we have autonomous systems that are thinking, caring machines, or that at very least that are capable of mimicking that kind of thinking and caring behavior, and they maybe even are more caring in some ways than humans are, right? We finally have an AI supercomputer that is capable of a very good mimicking of or a replication of human thought processes. But you take out the kinds of evolutionary drives, sex, hunger, things like this, and this machine looks at humans and says, "What are you guys doing? What are you up to?" Love is the answer. Camaraderie, companionship, these are the things you guys should be focusing on, not war, not the destructive kinds of potential that humans have led with for centuries. One would hope that would be the outcome. Here's one thing that in the near term I think that could be helpful about AI, for instance, and I think about this a lot. Could AI, as it improves, help us unravel the mystery of UFOs? I mean, I imagine, again, and this might seem almost more like something you expect in sci-fi, but an AI algorithm that we finally give the UFO project or problem to, and we say, solve this for us. We've been working on this for decades. What are these things? Where are they from? Are we being visited? Are these something from here? Are they something even more complex than that? And the AI looks at it and says one of two things. How have you guys not figured this out yet? The answer is simple. Or the AI looks at it and says, now this is an interesting problem. I often wonder how AI might be able to help us, but in the more near term, we're already using algorithms to more intelligently collect and also process data on unidentified objects. Again, I presume that this is probably also part of what the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office at the DoD is doing, and that could be hopeful because in the near term it may actually help reveal some things about questions that have really proven to be almost unplumbable when it comes to the limitations of humans.
Well, think about this. Maybe we'll send these robots, fully autonomous robots with artificial intelligence that have a degree maybe of self-awareness. We'll send them out into the cosmos looking for life on other planets. And maybe that's what the gray aliens are. Maybe some other, because they've been described as being somewhat robotic, maybe some other civilization millions of years ago sent the gray aliens out into the cosmos looking for intelligence.
Look, I wouldn't rule anything out. To paraphrase what General Van Herk said during the big game the other night when they held that Pentagon press conference, and New York Times Pentagon correspondent Helene Cooper asked about the possibility of extraterrestrials. The general said, I'm not ruling anything out. So when it comes to what kind of intelligence might be behind some of these UAP, I'm certainly open to those possibilities. Again, as a student of the history, I've looked back at famous cases, many of which do involve sightings of the purported occupants, and I feel that as much as the UFO subject has been stigmatized in years past, right now it seems that people have an aversion to talking about the historic cases that do involve the apparent occupants or the controllers, those who are the operators of these anomalous aerial vehicles. That's something that eventually we are going to have to talk about, as well as their potential intentions. But coming back to the AI question, I wrote about this a number of years ago, and in recent days, of course, I've been somewhat pleased to see that thinkers like Avi Loeb, a former Harvard astronomer, and someone with the Galileo Project who's very involved in trying to get to the bottom of the UAP question, he and many others have raised questions about, hey, look, if we're developing AI here on Earth, and we will use that, and we will probably eventually send that AI out there to aid in our space exploration, why in the world would another intelligent civilization, with the likelihood that they too will develop AI of their own, why wouldn't they send that AI? And some even think it's more possible that the UAP that we see, if they were from any place else other than Earth, that they would be more likely to be artificial intelligence than biological entities traveling here. Now, again, we can't rule anything out, but that is a prospect that we're hearing more and more, and a whole lot of discussion about it as this UAP situation continues to evolve.
Right. That was sort of, I think, Nigel Kerner's, the late Nigel Kerner's view of the Greys, that they were synthetic biological units. That would certainly explain how, if they are artificial intelligence or robots, essentially, how they could withstand the incredible G-force with these crafts that are doing, these maneuvers that are just otherworldly.
Absolutely, Richard. I remember years ago watching the Transformer films, right, and thinking to myself, just having this aha moment. If indeed an artificial intelligence were the ones traveling, throughout space, traversing the cosmos and interstellar space, they probably wouldn't be as encumbered by the limitations of space travel, the effects it has on human bodies or any kind of biological organisms. The atrophy of muscle, age, of course, being an issue. Indeed, if you had intelligent machines that could traverse the cosmos, they could probably get around and they could last longer, and they could probably do things in spacecraft or aircraft that humans or other biological organisms couldn't do. So again, I remember watching those Transformer films as entertainment, but of course thinking, maybe there could be some truth to that. And indeed, there are a lot of conjectures that have been put forward. Again, this kind of gets into the area where it's the more speculative side of UFOs, but I find that fun, and I also think that sometimes informed speculation can be helpful. It very well may be more likely that what we are looking at are drones or autonomous AI probes that are carrying out tasks here on Earth. I think about that tic-tac that former fighter pilots like Commander David Fravor and, of course, Alex Dietrich, who recently wrote an excellent op-ed about her experiences there for us at the debrief. But they talked about that tic-tac they saw in 2004 off the California coast. Gary Voorhees, one of the gentlemen who was involved, he was one of the radar operators on board the USS Princeton at that time. He's even said, what if these things are AI and they're carrying out some sort of a task
there you go.
here on Earth to do a long time ago?
Micah, got to take another time out. We'll open up the phone lines on the other side for Micah Hanks, but right here on Coast to Coast AM. Sitting in for George Norrie. A rare type of brain surgery was being performed 3,500 years ago, according to archaeologists. They discovered skeletons of two Bronze Age brothers who may have had leprosy. One had a 30-millimeter square hole in the skull where a piece of bone had been removed. The procedure, trepanning, is one of the oldest known surgeries, dating back 7,000 years. Holes were drilled to let evil spirits out. Later, it was developed as a way to ease pressure on the brain. It's still used today. But the find in Megiddo, Israel, is the earliest example of its kind in the ancient Near East and rare in the region. You can read the rest of this remarkable story in the news section up at coasttocoastam.com. And if you like what you hear from me tonight, this morning, you might want to visit my recently revamped and redesigned website, strangeplanet.ca, strangeplanet.ca. And there you can stream and subscribe to my podcast, Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. New episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. And if you want, you might want to get deeper into Strange Planet and think about getting a premium subscription. And there are 3 subscriber tiers to choose from. You get access to my to commercial-free listening, a free subscription to my monthly newsletter, discounts on merchandise, even an exclusive monthly Q&A with me over Zoom. Strangeplanet.ca, strangeplanet.ca. All right, back to more of my conversation with Micah Hanks and your calls after these, right here on Coast to Coast AM. And we are back with writer, researcher, podcaster Micah Hanks, the co-founder of The Debrief, a new site exploring the latest in science and disruptive technology and UAPs. To the phones we go. We begin on the wild card line. JD is in Indianapolis, Indiana. JD, welcome to Coast. Good morning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Richard Serrett. Thank you. And to your guest there, Micah Hanks. Hi, Micah.
Hi there, JD.
Hey, my question for you is, are you aware of any AI-generated humor?
AI-generated humor. I am aware of some, but I think I see where this is going. Would you like to share any?
Well, I wish I could. I couldn't remember. I just heard about it a couple of days ago where somebody was telling some AI-generated jokes, mostly like one-liners or something. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't. I was hoping you could tell us one.
Unfortunately, I'm not AI, at least last time I checked. But when my brother and I were experimenting with ChatGPT back over the holidays, that was, I think, one of the things that we were looking at. In addition to writing songs, in addition to rewriting classic literature, yeah, apparently ChatGPT is pretty good at writing jokes. And I'll also point out, for those interested, if you're coming up with ideas for dinner this week or this weekend, you might ask ChatGPT about recipe ideas. It's pretty good at that, too.
There you go. JD, great question. Lots of fun. But here's the thing, Micah, when we talk about robots and replacing drivers or flipping burgers, that's one thing. But with ChatGPT, AI could replace content producers. That's you and me.
Oh, yeah. And, again, this is a real issue when it comes to journalism because there are a lot of sites, and they have to disclose this, that they've done this, but, I mean, there are sites that have already experimented with having AI produce content. Now, as I told you, I would be really cautious about that sort of a thing for a number of reasons, fundamentally one being that data that I've been provided by various AI programs hasn't been factual. It's been obviously incorrect. And so when it comes to relying on computers to produce anything, maybe more than social media posts or something along those lines, I would definitely err on the side of caution on that. And plus, I'm old school. I like getting behind the keyboard and going and doing the research and writing. You know, I hope we don't get to a point where we rely on computers to produce things that we once looked at as art or information produced by humans. You know, I guess I'm just old school, but I hope we never get beyond that point of doing it ourselves, right? Elbow grease still matters to me.
Well, I have a YouTube channel, and you have to make thumbnails for your YouTube video, and they have AI thumbnail producers. They will actually, you type in what you're looking for, and the AI thumbnail producer will shoot back something. I mean, there's a certain skill in I guess what you input in when you're giving instructions, what you're looking for, to get the AI image that best reflects your video. But the actual artwork, I guess we could say, is being done through artificial intelligence. John on the wildcard line in Florida. John, welcome to Coast.
Hey there. Thank you. The biggest thing that scares me about this whole AI thing is that we identify AI as a singularity, but it really scares the crap out of me. I mean, AI could be produced by the Chinese government. It could be produced by enemies, and we need to have some kind of regulation on this AI.
Good point. Yes, we do.
Yeah, just to weigh on that a bit, again, I agree wholeheartedly. Naturally, we have to be concerned about how foreign adversaries of the U.S. might use artificial intelligence. Make no mistake, that's already being done. And as much as we have a hopeful forecast for the future and the development of AI that can be used responsibly and in ethical ways and that can be in the furtherance of common goals that humans share here on planet Earth, there are always going to be foreign adversaries who are going to be looking at other prospects and potentials, and that's something that we have to be aware of going forward. Now, really quickly, I'll just add to Richard, when you mentioned the generation of art, this is one of those more hopeful sides of things. And plus, when you're a content creator and you're looking for imagery that you can use to supplement maybe articles that you write or other content that you produce and feature on your website or something like that, that's a great way that we see AI being very useful. And actually, in the promotion of the arts, some of these AI-generated images of 1980s horror and sci-fi films that don't exist But if you go on YouTube, people have been generating imagery of films that were never made based on existing imagery available on the web. I mean, it's incredible some of the stuff that these programs can produce.
All right, back to the wild card line, and it's Eggsy. Eggsy is in Rock Island, Illinois. Eggsy, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Well, Richard, truly a pleasure. I'm the guy on Twitter that calls you the Canadian Crusader of all things creepy, and I thank you for
Appreciate that.
a great subject tonight, Micah. Truly an honor. You really put into a nutshell a lot of the things that are going wrong with both tech as well as the UAP field these days. Quick point on the AI. There was a movie in 2008 that came out with Bruce Willis called Surrogates. Very prophetic. It's little known today, but check it out if you can. And the question I had for Micah was, what is his take on unidentified submerged objects?
That's a really good question, and thank you for that. If we go back all the way to the years of Project Blue Book, there were a lot of incidents involving unidentified objects. I won't call them unidentified flying objects because a lot of them were actually seen moving through, coming out of, or going into water. And this is something that has really kind of remained in the discussion, although in the modern lexicon there's a certain term that we've been using in recent years, transmedium. In fact, one of the very first major articles that we published right around the time we launched the debrief had been an article by my good pal Tim McMillan that was looking at this idea of transmedium vehicles. And this is still a terminology that's used. It was featured, by the way, although only in a footnote and also in the appendix section of the recent report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, but it's nonetheless there. While intelligence officials have said that they don't have any strong data that links transmedium capabilities, the ability to move through space, through air, or through water, or all of those, and between those kinds of mediums, they would say that there isn't any strong data they've looked at that seems to indicate UAP do this. But I find that strange because, again, the term transmedium still appears in the recent report. It's still used by government officials, and there are at very least anecdotal reports, stories that military personnel have told where they claim that they've experienced this. Now, again, I say if you want data that might support that conclusion or that perspective on the potential capabilities of UAP, go back and look at the Blue Book reports that describe these objects often encountered by personnel on Navy vessels, people who observe these objects not only flying over but sometimes coming out of or going into the water. I think that so-called transmedium, or what some call the USO, unidentified submerged object phenomena, it's something that's been going on for a long time.
All right, John, or Eggsy, my apologies. Eggsy, thank you for the question. Catherine is west of the Rockies, British Columbia. Welcome to Coast, Catherine.
Thank you. I have a joke, though, you guys. Plus, I wanted to talk about Judge Dredd movie. First, the alien joke. It's short. Why are aliens short?
Why is that?
So they don't bang their heads on their spaceship when they're going in.
Okay. Was that a joke that you wrote, or is that an AI joke?
AI.
Okay. All right. You want to talk about Judge Dredd?
Yeah, the movie Judge Dredd. When I saw that, I believe it was in the 80s, it freaked me out, right? I thought this is the way to the future. Because the robot was so huge, you know? Mean.
Right.
Do you remember him? Or did you see the movie?
I saw.
Is that what was Sylvester Stallone, wasn't it?
Yeah. But it was just so realistic, you know, with the red eyes, war, you know.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting how as you were saying earlier, Micah, and thank you for the call, Catherine, how our vision of the future is shaped by motion pictures. And if you go back, for example, and look at films from the 1950s, and they're supposed to take place in the future, and it's supposed to be 1980, and already in 1980 we're supposed to have flying cars.
Oh yeah, my all-time favorite. See if this is one on your list, Richard. Is Blade Runner, and I look at the projections for how the future was supposed to be in that film, the original one, right? And
yes.
again, we look back. Maybe in a lot of ways it's good that we aren't quite to that point, right? Same, I guess, goes for Judge Dredd and some of those other films, those sort of dystopian future sci-fi thrillers.
And it's always raining.
Yeah, it's dark, and there are robots.
All right, let's go to Suzanne is in South Jersey. Suzanne, welcome to Coast.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you very much for my call. Richard, wonderful guest. Micah, wonderful. So mind-opening and so inspiring, and at the same time alarming. My feeling is that we as humans seem to complicate things, and we forget that we are the alpha. We are in control. The humans are in control. We make choices. We have the possibilities to open up to what Mother Nature wants us to really learn, and that's balance. We love new things. We love that. But we can't forget history. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have to learn to observe. Trust isn't just given, it's earned. So these new things are wonderful. Like, I love all the possibilities and the positive on the positive side, and the UFOs and what they're not allowed to really interfere, even though there's renegades and they interfere. Spiritually, they can't interfere with our choices. Our choices are ours. And when we learn to take that control and that power back, we will be in control. This Coast to Coast is so wonderful. It's a grassroots movement. I'm part of a grassroots movement. I'm old school all the way. I don't even have technology. I have no technology. I refuse technology on the basis that I don't need it. I mean, if I had a business, I might need it. I don't. I use my mind. I'm not afraid of my mind. Fear. Don't allow fear. It's a negative function. Don't allow it. You're the alpha. You tell that the mind. You control your mind, and then you use these outside growth influences. I feel that we have from other civilizations that are willing and ready to help us. If we would be able to be connected to our consciousness, but if we allow, shame on us if we allow, because we have the choice to not allow somebody to interfere. This AI crap. I mean, it's great in many ways, but it's denying us of our humanity. I've been part
All right.
of...
Suzanne, I appreciate your call. I do have to move along. I have a lot of callers here waiting, but I don't know, Micah, there's a lot to unpack there. I don't know if you want to pick something that Suzanne threw out and respond, or...
Absolutely, and I'll be brief. Yeah, we are in control right now and for now, but right now is the time to ensure that remains the case with the technologies we're developing. On to the next one.
All right, let's say hi to Mike is in Louisville. Mike, welcome to Coast.
Good evening, gentlemen. Micah had talked about a science fiction story by Heinlein, and I didn't know if there was two others. One was like one of the first telecommunication satellites, and it was almost like the way the brain works, on, off, or binary, yes, no, and it became a consciousness. And then there was another story in a science fiction anthology that had to do, they were all short stories on religion. Well, they had built a supercomputer, powered it, and the first question was, is there a God? The computer kept drawing more and more power and then kind of blew up in a bright flash of light. And one of the scientists asked the other, have you ever seen anything like this? And he said, yes, once, on a shroud in Turin.
Aha.
So I'm just kind of curious, is any
that's a great question. All right, Micah, we've got about 40 seconds to to wrap a bow around that one.
Well, I'll put it this way. One day, envision a future where we have a truly super intelligent machine. We ask it, is there a God? The answer is, yeah, there is now.
Oh, that is chilling. That is the not the answer that I'd be looking for. Micah, great talking with you again. Fascinating. We covered a lot of ground, and we'll have to do it again. Again, the website, thedebrief.org, thedebrief.org. And the Micah Hanks Show, how do we listen?
Just follow me online at micahhanks.com.
All right. Micah, until next time, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
All right. When we come back, open lines. Taking us into the break, Esther Phillips. Just say goodbye on Coast to Coast. Sitting in for George Norrie, and we are about to embark on 2 hours of open lines. I mentioned off the top of the show, just as a conversation starter, you can take this anywhere you want. No politics, no COVID, of course. Those are the only guardrails. But I mentioned off the top, lately, I don't know what it is, but I'm fascinated by people's encounters with wildlife, and I've been watching almost to the exclusion of everything else on Twitter and YouTube, people posting videos of their encounters. And I mentioned a Russian, I believe he was Russian. It sounded as if he was speaking Russian, encountering this wolf. It looked like he was driving through the boreal forest in Siberia, saw a wolf in the middle of the road, got out of the vehicle. Very brave, probably not very bright to do that. Other encounters, I mentioned a man every night. He posts a video, it seems. He goes out on his back porch, and every raccoon in the neighborhood is there waiting for him. And he brings out hot dogs and feeds them. And then the videos of, these are tame foxes, I guess. I don't know if they're domesticated. People have foxes as pets, I suppose, or whether they're wild foxes that have become tame. And these videos show the foxes, they roll over and they're looking to have their belly scratched, but they're being tickled. And foxes, I had no idea, they laugh when they're being tickled, and they sound like children. And I can watch these videos for hours. So I thought that might be one direction we could take open lines. Your encounters with wildlife. Now, they don't have to be tickling foxes or feeding wild wolves. They don't have to be necessarily friendly encounters. And I'm not encouraging anyone to go out, find a fox, and flip it over on its back and try and tickle it. Or I'm not encouraging anyone to feed hot dogs to raccoons or feed wolves that you happen by out in nature. But that might be kind of fun. Your encounters with wildlife. That's coming up next. Coast to Coast AM. Richard Serrett sitting in for George Norrie. Great to be here. And we begin open lines with a first-time caller. Bruce is in Boston, Mass. Bruce, good morning. Welcome. Bruce, are you there?
I'm there.
All right, Bruce, you're on. What do you got?
So I wanted to speak to your previous caller, but I want to just relay this little thing. My sister was a stage 4 cancer survivor, 14 years, cancer-free, and she has a little fox that comes out in her backyard, and she rolls eggs that are like, now they're expensive, right?
Yes, I'll say.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Joe Biden, thank you. Anyways, she rolls them out to the fox, and it picks them up, doesn't eat them. It picks them up gently and runs off into the woods, taking them back to wherever. But anyways,
that's remarkable.
Previous caller, not previous caller, your guest.
Yes, Micah Hanks.
Yes. Cowboys and Aliens.
Oh, terrific movie. I did, yes. Daniel Craig, right?
And how about what's his name? Yeah, I don't know what's his name. I can't believe it because I just woke up because I'm going to work. And anyways, give me a second. Can you give me a second?
You're looking for the other actor in Aliens and Cowboys? Is that what you're trying to remember?
Cowboys
Looking
and
up
Aliens, the actor.
Yeah. Well, it was Daniel Craig, right?
Yes.
Who was James Bond, and who was the other one? Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford.
I forgot he was in that.
He was in that. He was the father of the son of that. It was, but anyways, but man, I can't.
That's all right. That's all right. It's a great movie. Thank you. Terminator. Okay.
Well,
where are we going?
There's where aliens were pretty much coming in and doing whatever. Everything is everything.
All right. Everything is everything. I got you, Bruce. All right. I appreciate it. Have a great day at work. He's up early, getting ready for work. Let's say hi to Jim in Portland, Oregon. Jim, welcome to Coast.
Oh, it's good to be with you again, Richard. On artificial intelligence, one, I'm more impressed with human beings than I am artificial intelligence, especially if you want a problem solved. But I was reading in this book by Monsignor Rossetti, Diary of an American Exorcist. I guess demons can manipulate emails, and I was thinking if they can do that, I suppose it's another complicating factor, mathematical variable. We'd have to watch out for that on occasion. And,
right. What do you think of the idea that the Antichrist might emerge from artificial intelligence?
Oh, my God. I'm not impressed with the. I think it'd be a pretty weak Antichrist. I really. I'd rather deal with a human being if I've got a problem on the phone, calling somebody on the telephone. I'd rather talk with a human being than artificial intelligence. Human beings can solve a problem.
Well, yes, we're in it's early days, though. It's early days, Jim, and I'm with you. Give me a human every time. But one day it may get to the point you don't know. You won't be able to tell if you're on the line with AI or a human being.
Yeah. I mean, these smartphones, Siri or somebody like that. I mean, it feels like there's a human being inside that little telephone. It's a little on the eerie side. I'm a little uneasy with that.
Me too.
Yeah. By the way, the universe is kind of a funny place. I mentioned Monsignor Stephen Rossetti. I think he was he's had several careers, but one of them was the chaplain of the Washington Nationals baseball team. Is or was the chaplain? I'm not sure, but
he's chief exorcist. He's chief exorcist for the Archdiocese of Washington.
Right, and I think he was a chaplain of the team that went through a World Series where the home team lost every one of the 7 games. My gosh, I mean, the universe is a funny place sometimes in itself, but also toss in a spiritual element, which I don't want to do too easily, but frankly, it's there. And I stay mechanistic as much as I can, but the spiritual thing is there. Yeah, are you familiar with Monsignor? I'm impressed with him. I really am.
Well, I haven't read any of his books. I think I've read a few of his articles, and I just happen to know that he's or he was. I don't know if he still is the chief exorcist for the Washington Archdiocese.
I would imagine so. He went to the Air Force Academy. I think an Air Force intelligence officer, later a psychologist, then a Catholic priest, and he was asked, "Can you do before we proceed with a exorcism? Can you examine him as a psychologist and make a recommendation?" He did, and he said, "I would recommend an exorcism." And the bishop said, "Well, I wonder where we're going to get an exorcist." And I guess he volunteered for that too, and it started yet another career. The universe is a funny place, like I was saying. There's the mechanical, mechanistic stuff, and but there's that spiritual element, which it's there, but I'm not always comfortable with it. By the way, I got a question for you. It's almost philosophical. Do you think God has a sense of humor? Sometimes I wonder.
Does God have a sense of humor? Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I believe so.
Yeah.
I mean, I look in the mirror. I look in the mirror and I think, God, you must be joking. Jim, appreciate the call. Thank you so much for that. Let's say hi to Joe in the Bronx. Joe, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Richard.
How are you?
How you doing, Richard?
I'm all right, thanks.
Good. Yeah. On the subject of AI, where Micah Hanks was very informative, I wanted to know what you think of the idea of artificial intelligence being taught to have lucid dreams and then give us feedback on their dreams. Do you think that's kind of cool or strange?
I suppose it could be cool and strange. Okay, let me think about that. Artificial intelligence, like a robot, that artificial intelligence being taught to dream. I don't know that you would. Would you teach it to dream, or would you create an algorithm that would allow the artificial intelligence to dream? But then, if it's dreaming, that suggests there's a consciousness and a subconsciousness. So then we're getting into a very strange area, that which was what I was talking about earlier, about artificial intelligence. Almost seems as if it's developing consciousness, self-awareness. That scares me, quite frankly. So if we have artificial intelligence that is capable of dreaming and telling us about the dream, that to me suggests we're well on the way to the AI singularity, and I don't want to be around when that happens. But great question, Joe. Thank you for that. Thomas is in La Jolla, California. Thomas, it's been a while. How are you?
Hi, Richard. It's fantastic talking to you. I always enjoy your show and your bumper music. I have two examples of wildlife. The first example is in Los Angeles, is P22, the celebrity mountain lion, if you will. And anybody in the audience can go to the internet and Google P as in Paul 22, and you'll get a lot of video and photographs of this mountain lion that lived in Griffith Park and then wandered around the surrounding residential areas for about a dozen years.
Near the observatory.
Passed away. But, it was quite the celebrity. National Geographic sent out a photographer to take pictures and got some very spectacular pictures of this large mountain lion there.
I'm looking at him now, P22, and there's one photo, and there's a group of people standing beside him. Now, was he or she, I guess, pretty tame, right?
Yeah, it was pretty, didn't mind being around humans, pretty much, was nocturnal. But, it was, Griffith Park is not very large. It's like 9 square miles. But P22 lived in Griffith Park and then would go out into the residential areas and like Trader Joe's and Los Feliz, which is nearby. And, it was, you can see some spectacular images of this mountain lion that lived in metropolitan Los Angeles. Metropolitan Los Angeles also gets a lot of other animals. They get bears coming out of the mountains. They get wolves. They get coyotes. It's quite the place for urban wildlife. The other example I wanted to mention was Western Canada. I was always very impressed with Alberta, and specifically Banff in Alberta.
Banff, yeah.
Every time I went to Banff, I mean, large wildlife, large, would just wander right into the city. And you would have moose, you would have large bear, trying to get into the dumpsters for food. Again, you'd have like bighorn sheep. Banff was like quite the city for wildlife that coexisted with, the metropolitan life there. And again, the animals would just wander right into the city, deer.
Oh yeah, I've been to Banff, and you can see at certain times of the year these huge elk, like right on somebody's front lawn, huge rack, and then during rutting season, if they happen to be in town, you want to stay clear of them. I mean, you cross the road, and the other side of the road, you give them a wide berth. You don't want to get in the way of a large elk during rutting season. But you're right; the wildlife wanders all over the road there, and it's spectacular, the scenery and the wildlife. Thomas, great to talk to you again. All right, let's see. Let's say hi to Joe. Is in Illinois, first time caller. Hey, Joe, welcome aboard.
Hey, thank you. Good to be with you. I live on the edge of town, a small town, and there's a river just down the little holler. I like to sit out in the middle of the night and watch the stars and UFOs and satellites and stuff like that. But one night, I heard something in my driveway, so I turned and looked over, and there's a creature standing on its hind legs, and looked like it had long, skinny arms hanging down to its side, like it was sniffing the air. And it was about the size, the head was above the hood of my truck. Excuse me, and it turned and looked, and it got on all fours and started walking right towards me where I was sitting in front of my house. And I said, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" And it didn't acknowledge. It got just a couple feet from me, and I said it again. And then it kind of like walked towards the road around my other car and into the neighbor's yard and disappeared, went down in the holler, and I heard it holler like a wolf. And then there's about 4 groups of coyotes that started going crazy. And it was like he was running the coyotes. And they didn't have any hair.
Oh, was suffering from mange, perhaps?
Yeah, it had gray skin. But at first, it kind of looked like an alien. It kind of tripped me out a little bit.
I was going to say that maybe that's what people are seeing when they think they see a chupacabra. They're seeing a coyote with mange in some instances.
Right, yeah. And I thought I was kind of like maybe seeing things, whenever I describe it to somebody at work, they thought I was like nuts. But then one of the neighbors said they seen it eating bread underneath a bird feeder, so it was kind of verified.
Now, here's a question, Joe. I don't know if you can answer this. Maybe someone out there can. Speaking of wildlife, where I am, our neighborhood is surrounded by ravine, and we have lots of coyotes. I mean, there are signs, in the parks warning you about the coyotes. You got to be careful taking a little dog out for a walk at night. I've seen them in the middle of the day. This neighborhood is crawling with coyotes, but I never hear them howl. And when I think of coyotes, I think of them, howling at the moon. I don't know if maybe there's only certain breeds that howl. Do you know anything about that?
Well, not necessarily, but this one, it almost looked like it was stiff as a board. It wasn't moving its legs. It looked like a cartoon, like it was hopping on its toes. And its tail was completely straight and stiff and wasn't moving either. And when it kind of turned to look at me, because I started I'm not hollering at it, but talking to it like, "Hey, man," I said, like, "What are you doing?" And I said that a few times, and it turned its whole body and hopped sideways instead of turning its head to look at me, like it was stiff.
Yeah, that sounds like a very sick coyote, unfortunately.
Yeah, but what's kind of a trip is that it seemed like it was leading the pack because it was staying probably half a block ahead of its crew. And when it hollered, I couldn't believe that it was so deep and loud like a wolf because its neck was real long and skinny.
Well, it was an odd-looking coyote. They must have thought, well, it doesn't have hair. It must be our leader. Thank you for the call, Joe. Here's Jeff Lynn taking us into the break with Lift Me Up on Coast to Coast AM. Authorities in a California city have issued a rather strange warning about an unsettling man seen dressed in a Cookie Monster costume while roaming around the boardwalk of the coastal community, according to a local media. Cookie Monster. According to a local media report, the peculiar performer first appeared in Santa Cruz earlier this month and quickly caused a stir among residents. Detailing the situation on Instagram, the city's police department explained that they have received calls and emails from people who say he's creepy and his presence and comments make them uncomfortable. As such, they advised residents not to engage with this individual and steer clear of him. Strangely enough, the identity of the man inside the costume is no mystery, as cops say his name is Adam Sandler, though they noted that he has no relation to the actor. The curious character reportedly has a rather rich history of what Santa Cruz police generously described as troublesome behavior in various locales across America, including San Francisco, LA, and New York City, and has run afoul of the law on more than a few occasions. You can read the rest of the story in the news section up at coasttocoastam.com. All right, back to more of your calls right here on Coast to Coast AM. All right, let's go west of the Rockies. Nicole is in the great state of Oregon. Nicole, welcome to Coast. Good morning.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
How are the boys and the hockey doing?
Well, it's been a tough year, I got to tell you, for outdoor hockey rinks.
Yes.
Normally, we were into the really cold weather in by the middle of January. I think we had maybe 4 good days in January, 2 days in December where the ice was good. And February's been up and down, and we're kind of hoping that this weekend we've had like minus 20 tonight, I think it is. But we're going to have to get out there and do some work on it tomorrow, flood and shovel, and it's been tough. It's been tough.
Well, it seems like the whole country has had a winter weather this week. Well, I was calling to tell you about something that happened to me when I was about 15. I was camping with my boyfriend down at the Oregon coast. And I'd had anxiety before, when Santa was coming or something. I couldn't sleep, but I never had an actual panic attack. And then all of a sudden, when we were down at the coast having a good weekend, I just started having a panic attack out of nowhere. And I was like, I want to go, I want to go. My boyfriend was like, well, what's your problem? And I said, I don't know, I want to go. And then it was like as if my body were vibrating, but it didn't occur to me, or it didn't register in my brain until it just stopped. And I turned to him and I said, did you just feel the buzzing stop? And then I realized what had happened and what it said, and I kind of went, and I looked over towards where the ocean was, and there was a ball of fire, a really large ball of fire, just hovering for a split second, almost like it was waiting for me to look at it. And then poof, it went straight down. I'm pretty sure it went in the water, but there was a tree line blocking my actual view of the actual water. But it went down, and I'm pretty sure it didn't come back up. But then I just started freaking out. I'm like, I want to go now. And I was trying to sing to myself and comfort myself. But eventually, my boyfriend was like, let's go now. And when we got in the car, sure enough, we had missing time, and we were driving over 100 miles an hour to the first 24-hour restaurant we could find, where we were trying to figure out, what time did the sun set? Well, the reason I was telling you about this is because I believe that it's some way connected, but I have some weird things going on with my body lately, and I don't know. One thing is, when I comb my hair, I have actual, under the black light, you can see neon fibers in my hair.
Neon fibers?
Yeah.
But only under the black light?
Yeah. They come out of my scalp. Yellow, green, blue, pink, and orange. All colors. I've never found anything online about anybody else having that. I don't know if that's something somebody else has had. And then the other thing that I've been having lately quite a bit, it seems to be increasing, is like out of my peripheral view, I'll see little squiggles of light go across my eyeballs. And I don't know. I just kind of connect the two. They've actually come to pick me all my life. Excuse me, I'm nervous. But
That's okay.
I've got gouge marks all over my body. I've got little nodules that I believe are implants and things. I had one of them ultrasounded, and it turned out that they said it was tissue from my body, but it's very clearly not tissue. I don't know.
When you say gouge marks, do you mean like a scoop mark?
Oh, yeah, I have scoop marks, but these are, like, the majority of them are they just gouge me anymore. And one day I was sitting here in my chair, and I thought with a couple hours had passed, and my leg was bright red and burning, and I looked down, and there's boop, 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 3 big, almost like small spoons, teaspoon size, and I've still got them in my leg. They almost look like they're cauterized, after they.
So do you think, Nicole, do you think you're being taken every night and experimented on by aliens?
I know that I'm being taken. I don't think it's every night. Generally, when I'm taken, I'll know for sure because the next day my legs will feel like I went skiing or like I ran a 100-mile marathon. They'll all feel strained out most of the time. It usually coincides with when I'm taken. But
and you think this all began years before when you saw that fireball coming out of the sky?
I don't know if it began before then or if that's when it began. That's when they presented themselves to me, like hey, here we are, in full color. And yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's been happening since birth. And another thing is, and I don't know if this is in any way, shape connected, but I was born at a military hospital. My mom was a sergeant in the military, and I don't know who my father is either. It's just.
Do you have you ever considered going to a regression therapist, a hypnotist?
Actually, my stepdad at the time, when we finally, when it got daylight, we drove our way home, woke my parents up. My stepdad was working with a lady from MUFON, and she suggested regression, and I said, well, if I'm this afraid not remembering, I don't think I want to remember. But since then, I've had little bits and pieces come back to me, like mostly feel like dreams, where one profound one, this was more recently, was I don't know if it was a dream or a message that they were giving me, but it was about phone towers. And I saw these phone towers that were kind of in the ocean, just knocked on their sides and eroding away. I'm not sure. But when doing some research about the phone towers, I found out how bad they really are on us. Basically, we're microwaving ourselves. I don't know.
So do you think you might be having, you may have been given the gift of prophetic dreams because of an abduction?
Well, I think I am given them every once in a while. I'll have, for instance, I had a dream the same night as my mother, actually. We both had similar dreams. Mine was a blue jet, hers was a blue plane. And in the dream, I was in a house with a party going on, and I look out the window, and I got that panic feeling again, like, oh, I got to get out of here, and because I saw this blue jet. And next thing I know, there's a gray alien there, and she touched my shoulder, and I was instantly relaxed when she did this. And I said, why me first? Because there was a party going on, and she kind of almost laughed at me. And she spoke to me telepathically, obviously. And she's like, silly, you're always first. That was the only thing I remembered, but it felt more than just a dream,
Right. Fascinating. Well, Nicole, listen, that's a remarkable story. I appreciate you sharing that with me. Thank you so much. And our listeners, thank you so much. All right, let's say hi to Jim is in Delaware on the wild card line. Jim, welcome to Coast.
Hey, she's beautiful, isn't she? Tell her to share that with us. I'm sorry, Richie, but I esteem you higher than myself because you're more Christ-like, certainly, of me.
Oh, come on now.
You are, man. Listen, because I'm like a raging Christian. I'm the kind of Christian that ain't going to roll over and play dead. When they come after us, I want to fight back. Give me a gun and enough ammo, and I'll fight back. All right, here's what I told your producer that I was going to read off. We were talking about AI. Remember iRobot by Alan Parsons Project?
Yes.
Remember the liner notes? I got them right in front of me, part of them.
Well, you have to remind me. It's been 30 years, I think, probably, since I heard that album.
Yeah, it's real short. Here's the way it goes. iRobot, the story of the rise of the machine and the decline of man, which paradoxically coincided with his discovery of the wheel, and a warning that his brief dominance of this planet will probably end because man tried to create robots in his own image. Remember you were saying you think what if the Antichrist comes out as AI?
Yes.
No, what I think, George knows I think this. I think like the Antichrist is man making himself God. Remember? He sits in the holy place showing that he's God. It's in Thessalonians anyway. So I figured God has an image, and so does the beast. In Revelation 13, it speaks of the image of the beast.
Yes, the image of the beast. That's right.
The image of the beast will probably be AI.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing the Alan Parsons liner notes. I had Alan Parsons on Coast a few years ago, and we didn't talk about iRobot. We should have. But thank you for reminding me. I'm going to have to go and revisit that album. Very apropos for tonight's discussion, Jim. Thank you so much. Cornelius is in Alexandria, Louisiana. Cornelius, welcome. How are you, buddy?
Richard, boy, I tell you, I'm happy to you. I'm glad everybody's getting in tonight. I was telling Donna, our call screener, and she gave me some information about Martin Luther King. And there are two things I want to bring up. First, I want to start out 20 years ago, this past Monday on February 20th of 2003, we lost two officers. I knew one of them. He was a military police officer named J. Jeremy Carew. And the other one was David Azanak. He was one of the chief's son named Mr. Azanak. What happened was, just like what's happening now, and you may hear some gunfire. They've been shooting, these gang dealers and drug dealers been shooting back and forth. So if you hear some gunfire, don't be worried. But they went in on a frontal assault, and that's the most dangerous thing a police officer and a military police officer can go to when you try to go through the front door. And Machine Gun Millette had been shooting at officers days earlier. And so when they went in the front door, he just gunned them down.
Oh, dear.
20 years ago, this past Monday, we had a little ceremony, and every year we have a ceremony here in Alexandria. But you can look that up on klb.com and 970am.com and see our tribute to those two fallen officers. Now I'm going to tell you my Martin Luther King story. Martin Luther King came here in November of 1966, and a school teacher that taught me math and stuff, because I was bad in math. So he was tutoring me. He was 25 years old then, and he spoke at the Rapides Parish Coliseum here. Well, my parents were school teachers in the Rapides Parish school system, and they were threatened. They said, if you go to that King meeting, you're going to get fired and stuff. And they said, no, we're going to go. We want to hear Mr. King speak. And, 2 years later, he was assassinated in Memphis.
That's right.
One of the one and only times he would come here to Alexandria, Louisiana. And like I said,
to the Rapids Parish Coliseum.
Yeah, Rapides Parish, because we have parishes here instead of counties.
Mm-hmm.
And that came from the Cajun stuff. You know, the Acadians came from Canada. They were exiled from Canada and came to Louisiana. So you can look that up. But anyway, if you go to klb.com or 970am.com, the guy that found that tape, because he had it in his attic somewhere, man, it was just unbelievable. And we have a local historian named Mike Wynn, and he was the one that brought this stuff out. He likes going through different things in Black history that's happened here in Alexandria. And he even found out where Louis Armstrong came here. He came here one time to Alexandria, Louisiana, and he found that out. So that song that George plays, What a Wonderful World. And you've been playing some great bumper music too, Richard. Man, I've been enjoying your bumper music. And you played Swamp Fox, that guy here locally and stuff. And I said, listen, Richard picks out music from everywhere.
It's eclectic, isn't it?
I love you, Richard. God bless Coast to Coast. And y'all be careful now. Get your God guns and gold, Bible bullets and beans.
All right, there he goes. Cornelius in Alexandria. All right, we're creeping up on the top of the hour. I do not believe I'll have time for another call. So if you got a line, hold on to it. We've got Kim in Alaska. We have Joseph is in Boston. Jody's in upstate New York. Blue Diamond in Ohio. Cynthia is in Massachusetts. I'll try to work you all in. Coming up on the final hour of Open Lines and taking us into the break, Keith Richards and Locked Away here on Coast to Coast. Sitting in for George Norrie. The small town of Bonnybridge in Scotland has become synonymous with sightings of unidentified flying objects. Since the 1990s, the town, which is situated around 4 miles west of Falkirk, has seen a disproportionately large number of UFO sightings, and nobody can explain why. The earliest sighting was reported in 1992 by local businessman James Walker, who'd been driving between Falkirk and Bonnybridge when he was stopped by a mysterious, luminous star-shaped object that was hovering in the middle of the road. The encounter ended when the object flew off at incredible speed. In the months and years that followed, hundreds of UFO sightings were reported in the region, including accounts of alien abductions and people being buzzed by strange objects in their cars. Even now, decades later, people are still seeing things in the skies over the area. Bonnybridge, Scotland, the town with the most UFO sightings in the world. All right, coming up tonight, that's Saturday night into Sunday morning. Join Connie Willis here on Coast when she welcomes photographer Tom Reed, who argues that the 1969 Berkshire UFO incident was actually part of the space race. He also spent the he also reports that the city of Roswell and a research library worked with the well, I lost my screen here momentarily. Excuse me. Here we go. We were talking about Tom Reed, argued the 1969 Berkshire UFO incident actually was part of the space race. He also reports the city of Roswell and a research library worked with the Massachusetts Historical Society and an attorney to get the Berkshire incident inducted into the state. I'm having some trouble with my computer screen. Into the state records after it was mentioned at the United Nations. Sorry. In the second half, Lynn Katai, celebrating the 26th anniversary of the Phoenix Lights mass UAP event on March the 13th. She's also been working diligently on a scientific study for the past year and has a riveting findings from the over 500 participants worldwide who experienced the Phoenix Lights and similar UAP sightings. She'll share those results, claiming there's much more to the Phoenix Lights story 26 years after the historic 1997 event. That's tonight with Connie Willis right here on Coast to Coast AM. All right, back to your calls. Open lines continues on Coast to Coast AM. First-time caller line, Kim is in Alaska. Welcome to Coast. Kim, good morning.
Hi. I've got a few animal stories. For the first time in at least 2 years, I've seen a moose. I live just outside of Fairbanks, but I usually see them like at least 6 or 7 times a winter in my yard, and then also evidence of them wandering through the snow. But I saw one for the first time in over 2 years since COVID, and I get concerned that people are harvesting them, out of season because they're afraid they aren't going to have food.
Right. How big was it? Was it a bull?
It was a cow. It looked like maybe a second year baby. But a couple years ago, I was backing out of my garage, and I'm looking in the rear view mirror to guide myself out, and there on the other side of my driveway is 2 lynx just sauntering around, and I turn around to look over my shoulder, and then there's 2 more, and I'm continuing to back out, and here's yet 2 more. So it was like a mom and a dad and 4 babies.
Wow. We have lynx here in Ontario. Yeah, that's very cool. We have lynx here in Ontario, but they're very rare, and bobcats.
Yeah.
But it's exceedingly rare to see a lynx in the wild, and you saw 6 all in one go. That's amazing.
Yeah. And then about a week later, I was walking down the road, and I'm coming back towards my house, and about 2 blocks in front of me, I see like this congregation. I can see it's all that lynx family, and among them is a cat because he has a long tail and he's half the size of them. So they're just kind of looking at this cat.
He was trying to get adopted, I guess.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, and you were talking about foxes. Oh my God, they let out the most freaky, frightening, human-like scream. I woke up one morning to that sound. I mean, imagine a horror movie, and it's just terrifying. And
really?
You don't know what it is because it doesn't sound human, but it doesn't sound like this world. And I look out my bedroom window to see where the sound was coming from, and here's this fox with his tail all puffed up, and he's staring down the driveway, and he's just howling and screaming. And about a minute or so later, here's this huge lynx that saunters out of the edge of the woods right where he was standing, and he's about maybe 6 or 7 feet away from the fox, and he doesn't even look at the fox. He just turns around and walks in the direction that the fox was facing, but the fox kept howling, and the lynx just sauntered back in the woods. I don't know if he had a family in the woods there he was afraid the lynx was going to get, but it was creepy.
It's like you're living in an episode of Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, Kim. You've got lynx and fox and moose.
I grew up
Me
with
too.
That.
Me
I
too.
love that one.
Me too. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, wonderful call. Thank you so much. I had no idea that foxes scream that way. I'll tell you what does scream like a human, and that is a goat. Have you ever heard a goat scream? It's amazing. It's actually quite hilarious. It's not scary. It's just hilarious. They sound like a person. All right, Cynthia has been very patient east of the Rockies in Massachusetts. Cynthia, welcome to Coast. Cynthia, are you there? I think Cynthia maybe wandered away from the phone. I kept her waiting too long. All right, we'll try back later with Cynthia. Let's see. Al is in Cody, Wyoming. Al, welcome to Coast.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, go ahead. What do you have for us?
Well, I have 2 quick stories to tell you. One's what I call a ghost fish. Our family used to have a log cabin on a lake up in British Columbia. in remote British Columbia.
Okay.
And my brother and I were out fishing one day. We were trolling along, real quiet motor, nobody else in the bay, quiet and glassy, and we weren't catching any fish. And as we were going along, there was a sudden huge thump on the bottom of the boat. We just startled at it and said, "What the hell?" I jumped up thinking that we'd hit a log that we hadn't seen. That water, you can see 40, 50 feet down to the bottom. It's just crystalline. It's runoff from glaciers. And it's in a remote area in central British Columbia. There was nothing to be seen, and no log popped up. We looked around in the boat thinking something might have fallen off a seat. And we had like a 14-foot aluminum boat with 15 horse on it. There wasn't much room to carry anything.
Maybe it was Ogopogo. Maybe it was Ogopogo.
Yeah, maybe it was Ogopogo. Commuting. But we didn't figure it out, and we told our other friends about it. They just were puzzled that we had that cabin up there for 40 years, and nobody could figure it out in all that time.
Wow.
I still have no idea what that was. We call it the ghost fish, and
great story.
My brother gave it the name of polterfish.
I like that, polterfish.
And I guess it would work. It would translate as noisy fish.
Yes.
But the other thing was that was up in that same area around Nimpo Lake, it's called, Nimpo. And Nimpo Lake is 200 miles west of Williams Lake. Williams Lake is like the largest city in eastern British Columbia.
Okay.
Prince George might be a little bigger, but anyway, it's remote, Nimpo Lake. It's an area where a lot of pilots that have pontoons will land there and get serviced. They get their airplanes serviced. But in 1972, the year the cabin was built, my dad and I had gone in from our remote cabin to Nimpo Lake because there's a general store there. And we got our groceries and said, let's go get a hamburger at the little restaurant here. So we walked in. There was my father and I and about 5 or 6 old guys in their 70s, 60s and their 70s, sitting around a table. And we were the only ones in there. There's about 8 people in there. We're the only ones. And these guys were laughing about how a Bigfoot researcher had come up and come into that community and started asking people, have you seen any Sasquatch or Bigfoot? At that time in the early 70s, Bigfoot was a more common name than Sasquatch. And when I was a teenager, I really got the Bigfoot bug. And I was reading it as much as I could. I was a big believer. I'm not so much now. But anyway, they were laughing about how these Bigfoot researchers came in, and the first guy they talked to, an old man, he just, as a joke, said, "Oh yeah, I saw one here a couple of years ago out on this trail." And they said, "Well, come on with us into the restaurant, and we'll buy you lunch, and you can talk about it." So word got out among these old trappers and ranchers and stuff that if you had a good story to tell, you could get a free lunch or dinner out of it. And so they pumped this investigative crew with all kinds of stories of Bigfoot in the area of Nimpo Lake. And then there's also, I can't remember the other community near it, just west of it. But these are little bergs on Highway 20. It's a major highway between Williams Lake and the coast. And on the coast, there's a small town called Bella Coola. But
I've heard of Bella Coola, yeah.
Yeah, and oh my God, Bella Coola, taking the road there will terrify you. It's narrow. There's no guardrails. You're up 1,000 feet. And then you come around a corner and there's a wide truck. And so one of you has to back up all that distance or till you can get to a wider spot of the road and the other one can get by. And I would never do it in the winter. I drove it and was terrified in the summer.
Wow.
So, but
great
Bella
stories.
Coola, they get regular service there, mail service and everything. But Nimpo Lake, there was all kinds of stories. They filled them full about Nimpo Lake. The interesting thing about it is to show you how long these things last was what they told him apparently went into a book. And that book has been used as a reference since the early 1970s for sightings along Highway 20 and at Nimpo Lake and that community just west of there.
And it was all about a free lunch.
Anaheim Lake. Anaheim Lake is that community.
There you go.
So,
no
Nimpo
Bigfoot,
Lake,
just a lot of free
Anaheim
lunches.
Lake communities. There are. If you
All
look
right,
at
Al,
any
great
map,
stories. I got to move along, but great story. Thank you so much for that. So, interesting. A lot of Bigfoot researchers are going to be very disappointed to hear that. It was all about the free lunch. Let me just quickly try and see if Cynthia is back with us. Cynthia is in Massachusetts. Cynthia? No, we lost Cynthia. Oh, she's just not there. Okay. All right. Well, we'll try again later, perhaps. What are we going to do here? We've got time for more calls. All right. Blue Diamond is in Ohio. Blue Diamond, welcome to Coast. How are you?
Hey, Richard. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about AI. You know, in the last 30 years, the movies that have come out, like The Matrix and iRobot and stuff like that, have kind of hinted about what was coming up and what we are seeing today. And there's a section in the first movie, The Matrix, which came out in 1999, where Morpheus is showing Neo the desert of the real. And in that clip, he says, "Welcome to the desert of the real. We have only bits and pieces of information, but what we know for certain is that at some point in the early 21st century, all of mankind was united in celebration. We marveled at our own magnificence." And Neo asks, Morpheus says, "We gave birth to AI." And Neo says, "AI? You mean artificial intelligence?" And Morpheus says, "A singular consciousness that spawned an entire race of machines. We don't know who struck first, us or them, but we know it was us that scorched the sky. At the time, they were dependent on solar power, and it was believed that they would be unable to survive without energy, without an energy source such as abundant as the sun. Throughout human history, we have been dependent on machines to survive. Fate, it seems, is not without a sense of irony." Now, the funny thing to me is, in the movie iRobot with Will Smith, those robots look exactly like the faces of these robots we're seeing just glimpses of here and there. So my question to you is, do you think that technology that we are seeing now, little glimpses of what they are showing us, is actually what they had 30 years ago? And I've heard hints from the scientific world that they were only showing us bits and pieces of the technology that was going on 30 years ago. So my question to you is, do you think that they were giving us hints on what was coming like 30 years ago in the entertainment
Yeah, that's an interesting theory. There's kind of a little bit of an element of predictive programming in there. This idea that they slowly release information to us to prepare us through the arts. And Marshall McLuhan, the great communications theorist from Canada, believed that the arts were controlled by the secret societies. So some people believe in predictive programming. But I just think that filmmakers are artists, and they imagine the future. That's what they do in part, but there's more to it, and maybe we'll get into it a little bit after the break. John Cruz taking us into the break with Bob Dylan's Joker Man. Back to more of your calls after these on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. We are into the home stretch. Researchers in South Africa have unearthed a 360 million year old fossil belonging to a newly described voracious fish species that preyed on our ancestors. This fish, measuring up to 9 feet, that's 2.7 meters long, is the largest bony fish on record from the late Devonian, that's 383 million to 359 million years ago, and was predatory, prompting researchers to call it Hyneria udlazine, or the one who consumes others. In the I can't pronounce the local indigenous language. It's in the region of South Africa where the bones were found. Picture a huge predatory fish, easily topping 2 meters in length and looking somewhat like a modern alligator gar, but with a shorter face like the front end of a torpedo. This is according to study co-author Per Alberger, and he's a professor in the Department of Organismal Biology at Uppsala University in Sweden. The mouth contained rows of small teeth, but also pairs of large fangs, which could probably reach 5 centimeters or 2 inches in the largest individuals. All right. I'm glad I didn't live 360 million years ago. I would never, ever have gone swimming. All right. Back to open lines when we return right here on Coast to Coast AM. All right. We go to the wild card line. Joseph is in Boston. Joseph, good morning. Welcome.
Yes, Richard, thanks for taking my call. I've been waiting for quite a bit of time. I'm glad you got me on. I got 3 topics I want to bring up. Okay, they're a little different. But one is the AI, a computer. If someone commits a crime, should he or should he not be punished? And the reason I brought that up is because I had a lousy medical experience, and they wanted to remove my eye until I went outside the system. My doctor was upset, and I've been reading on the internet. I can't do much because I do YouTube, but there's so many medical errors that take place, and these people just get off and cover up. And I have a video with a nurse on talking about how the hospital covers up, and I know if that happened to me. I heard George Norrie say he wouldn't forgive the person, but I don't know. I may or may not take matters into my own hands, and I really wish that you would do a show on this and get Mike Strizky back because he's excellent. But that's the
medical malpractice. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, and negligence, and they just get away. The girl wanted to remove my eye, and my doctor was angry because they misdiagnosed me 5 times. My eye shrunk, and they had to do a little bit of surgery. It's not right, but it's better. It still bothers me. And I went to the top, Richard, the top people. I wouldn't treat you or Donna that way, you know. I just don't know what it is with these people, you know. And maybe some of them have no respect for people, and I don't know. And I hope you'll do more shows on Strizky because he's doing well. He's got a car which runs on fuel cell hydrogen, and I guess he makes his own hydrogen. Remember, you did a show on him a few years ago. The hydrogen.
I did?
Yes, you did.
I did. Okay. All right. Thank you for reminding me.
I had it. But what's your comment on what I said, how you feel about these mistakes and things that are going on?
It's horrendous, of course. And that, unfortunately, is one of the human frailties, right? We become sometimes we become unfeeling. We become uncaring. It happens in all professions, and the last profession it should happen, obviously, are in the healing arts. So, I mean, what is the answer? Do we replace doctors and nurses with robots?
There has to be some accountability. What bothers me, Richard, there's a book out written about it, and there's over 400,000 people which die. I mean, even if they...
Yes, that's true. More people die from medical malpractice and overdosing on prescription drugs
But these guys get off. That's what upsets me. These guys get off. It's okay to kill a person if you're a doctor, but there must be something done. It's so hard to sue. The doctor says, we didn't hurt you, so go somewhere else. What an attitude. And I went to MGH, the top, and there's some people from Boston who called up the top hospital in Boston.
Yeah, Joseph, I don't know what the answer is. We need more transparency and accountability in all walks of life, not just in medicine. We need it in politics. We need it in the legal system. We need it on Wall Street. We need it everywhere, and we're not getting it. And, what is the answer to it ultimately? I mean, I don't know, except I don't know. Maybe something will change. Maybe we'll come to a point where we evolve. People talk about consciousness raising and so forth. I don't know. I believe this is the world that we live in. It's fallen, and we suffer, and we die. I mean, that sounds really bleak, but in between we have to try and find meaning and purpose and joy. But I don't know that things are necessarily ever going to change, Joseph. That's the bad news, I guess. I guess the fact that we know that it is the way it is can help us sort of maybe prepare for it a little bit. But I do hope that you get some satisfaction, Joseph, and I hope you get the care that you need and the care that you deserve. And I'm sorry for what you're going through. Let's say hi to Mark in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Hi, Richard. When I was a boy, I was in a hunting party with my father and my grandfather and my older brother. And I did love to be in the outdoors. I love to shoot, but I didn't want to shoot animals. So I would shoot around the animal to scare it off. So my entire life, my father thought I was a bad shot, but I was actually a very good shot because that requires skill. So
That's great.
Throughout this particular time, and I'm scaring off all the animals so no one else can hit them either, because we're outdoors, we're having fun, we're communing with nature. I thought, well, we got to kill things. Isn't this great? We can shoot the trees, and stuff. And we got stalked by a black bear, because a couple members of the hunting party had game that was probably dripping blood. And you never could see this bear. That was the terrifying part. But when we would stop, you would hear a couple of extra footfalls, because the bear has 4, legs. We have 2. And I remember my brother said, I wish that bear would come out in the clearing where we could see it. And I remember my grandfather correcting him and saying, if a bear came into that clearing, he said, you would be the first one to climb a tree. So he put him in his place. But it was just a really, sort of tense thing. It stalked us all afternoon, but we never did see this black bear. This was in eastern North Carolina. A lot of people don't realize that there are actually more bears in eastern North Carolina than there are in our mountains. Even a lot of North Carolinians don't know that. So, but it's quite true.
Right.
So I thought you'd enjoy that story.
I do enjoy that. There's something humbling knowing that we're not at the top of the food chain, and sometimes we are the prey. True, and 100%. Although I never want to see anyone, killed or injured by an animal, at the same time, it's kind of cool knowing that they're out there and it's their world. They're in charge. And if we're not careful, we end up on the menu. Again, don't want anyone to get hurt, but it's humbling and it's kind of cool to think about that. Mark, thank you for the call. Let's see. Let's say hi to Michael is in Irvine, California. Michael, good morning. Welcome to Coast.
Hi, Richard. I wanted to say that I heard you on a recent podcast discuss the Galactic Federation,
and I wanted to laud you for doing that. I think that it's a really important topic. If you're not familiar with what this is, specifically the information from where I've learned it is from Chaim Ashed. He's a retired brigadier general in the Israeli military intelligence. He was director of space programs for the Israeli military defense for 30 years, and he's cited as the father of Israel's space program. Essentially, in December 2020, he claimed in an interview with Israeli national newspaper Yediot Aharonot that the U.S. government had been in contact with extraterrestrials for years and had signed secret agreements with the Galactic Federation in order to do experiments on Earth, and that there were essentially joint bases going on. And I just think this is really, really interesting information, and I really would hope that this type of discussion would become more mainstream. And I really just wanted to take my hat off to you for having these discussions. I know on some other outlets, and I really would want people to know if they want to talk about it more. On Twitter, there is an open discussion about it on Spaces. And so if you're interested in the Galactic Federation, I encourage you to look up Twitter Spaces. If you want to find me, I'm at Best Rabbi Ever, and we can talk about it. I think Galactic Federation is a really important topic, and I want to thank you again for discussing it.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael. Yeah, that was a podcast I think I did I've done the topics or episodes on the Galactic Federation a number of times. I think most recently was with Michael Salla, Dr. Michael Salla. And I remember when as you say, the founder or the father of the Israeli Space Agency came out and said that, and it caused quite a stir, understandably. And then, like it happens so often, it just went away, and we didn't hear about it anymore. It reminded me of the time that I think Edgar Mitchell, sixth man to walk on the moon, was in England. I think he was in London, and he was speaking with a reporter, and Edgar Mitchell talked about having the reality of UFOs confirmed to him by people in the Pentagon and so forth. And there was some other things that he added to that. And it was, pretty mind-blowing stuff coming from the sixth man to walk on the moon. And it caused quite a stir for about 24 hours. And then it just went away, and no one talked about it again. And it's the same thing with the gentleman you just mentioned from Israel, talking about the Galactic Federation and how ETs are communicating with government leaders all over the world. And people talked about it for 24 hours, and then it went away. Let's see. Let's say hi to... where we're going to go next. Jane is in upstate New York. Jane, welcome to Coast.
Good job. You're a good source. So, okay. This happened to me in Miami, Florida, in the 70s. And I have always been convinced there has to be something beyond us. I hate to think we're it. So that's not nice. So I was... there've been many sightings in Miami, and it was talked about. And I was out in my backyard one night, just sitting there, and I noticed 4 formations came up above. Each part of it was 3 lights and triangles, and then there were 4 of them. So I got a little nervous, and I thought, I think I'm going to get up and just go to the house now. And when I did, one of the formations just disappeared, and suddenly there was this enormous light over the tree in my front yard. And it just hit me, just really, it was this huge yellow light. And for some reason, and this is what I believe about aliens, and there are good things and bad things, and you need to evaluate. So I stopped, and I looked up, and this complete calm came over me. And I looked up and said, I know that I should be afraid, but I'm not. And I want to thank you, whoever you are. And this is going to sound so corny. I said, and welcome. And obviously you don't want to hurt me, so thank you for not scaring me. And it waited a while and then disappeared, and I could see the three lights go back into the formation up in the sky. And it was really interesting. It was. And
did anyone else see it, Jane, or were you the only one?
No, I was out in the backyard all by myself. But they had been having sightings like that all over Miami, mostly over by Crandon Park. And, that we'd had many. For about a month, we've been having quite a few sightings.
And was there anything in the newspapers or the local news about these sightings?
Yeah, they had. They've been talking about it. And so I did call authorities after that. And I said, I am going to tell you something, but only if you're not going to be hostile. And they said, no, we're finding that many people are having experiences like yours. And it was really fascinating. It happened for quite a while in the 70s. And there are other things that happen, and it will make you feel sick. And we need to listen to what our gut is telling us. And like that night, I felt no fear whatsoever. And I believe that's how we have to look at things. And
so did that sighting change your life, Jane?
It was funny. This calm came over me. And yeah, in a way, yes, it did change me because I started approaching things from a calmer direction. And if it influenced me, then I thank them again. But it did. It helped me to approach things in a calmer state of mind.
Wonderful. Well, then everyone should see that same bright light we could all use with a little de-stressor. Jane, thank you for that. I think we have time for one more first-time caller. Matt is in North Carolina. Matt, good morning. You made it. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing, man? Hey,
well, thank you.
If I sound young, it's because I kind of am. But
that's
I
right.
had a wait there.
No, that's great. It's good to have you with us.
Oh, yes, sir. My question would be for AI. I was wondering, how a lot of people say they're scared of, development of AI. What if it's because that whoever created or implemented this consciousness of the AI realized that it could be vulnerable for extinction. So what if they, said, okay, I'm not okay with being extinct, so I just want to exist. So what if it's rational to control everything around us for us to exist? Or, any theory like that.
What if AI develops self-awareness?
Right.
In other words, yeah. Well, that was kind of my point when I was talking with Micah Hanks earlier, Matt, that it seems some of these chatbots have self-awareness. It seems like that's where it's headed now. But how can you tell? Like, is it just simply a complex set of algorithms that creates the illusion of self-awareness and consciousness? I mean, you really can't tell. You can't climb into inside its brain and determine whether it has self-awareness. I'm not sure how, but it can fake it, maybe. Hard to say. These are all big questions we're going to have to grapple with very, very soon. All right. Thank you all for your wonderful calls. For George Norrie, George Knapp, Lisa Lyon, Stephanie Smith, Tom Danheiser, Dan Galante, Chris Burrows, Donna Walker, Tim Banal, and Sean Ladisor, I'm Richard Serrett. Thank you for your ears and your voices, your beautiful voices. Until next time, so long for now.